Head forester Andreas Vollmer is conducting an experiment for his guests. Gather round closer, he says. And then everybody crouch down. Imagine we're all little trees. We're all spruce saplings, all close together, just like in nature. And we all want to grow. And because we're trees, we don't just want to grow up, we want to spread our branches too. So let's all stand up and spread our arms, and you see how tight it gets. Lesson number 1. In nature, the stronger one prevails, always. The problem here is too many spruces and too few silver firs. The forester explains the fir's benefits. You see what a fat root this is, like a carrot, he says. It illustrates well that these trees can reach more different minerals in the ground, deeper water reserves in the summer, making them simply the more stable tree. They're comparable with oak trees on the flat plains. The oak epitomizes sturdiness in lowland forests, and up here, it's the fir. 10 women and 4 men are spending a week outdoors to help the forest and protect the valuable firs. Only a few grow as tall as these. Young firs are a delicacy for deers and stags that wander through, nibbling off the buds, stunting their growth, says Andreas Vollmer. And that puts other trees at an advantage. And where firs and spruces coexist, animals seem to always prefer eating the firs. There is no vacation. These volunteers have booked a week of hard forestry work. One participant, Carola, says they're going to learn how to wrap the firs in wool. That's supposed to protect young saplings against being bitten off. But before work can start, more instructions. The helpers are getting chilly and impatient, but the chief forester wants to make sure everyone knows how it's done right. The wool has to be spread over the bud and then wound over the needles. Looks easy, but it's not. Even finding the baby firs in the forest is a problem. The rule of thumb is, spruces sting, firs don't. Project manager Andreas Friesiker observes and criticizes. That's not going to work, he tells Ronnie, the volunteer. The sapling might not be bitten off, but there's so much wool it won't grow next season. Use less. And Ronnie asks, even less than that? Gerlind says she loves it here. It's fascinating. It's a lot of work, but she thinks it's great to achieve something through simple means, stopping the deer from coming and destroying the trees. I find their enthusiasm for each tiny tree astonishing, but unlike the volunteers, this is my first time here. Everyone in the group takes up the burden once a year to work for Germany's forests. Yesterday at the train station at Johanngeorgenstadt in Saxony, it was all a big welcome back. These people know each other. Weeks in the woods together forge bonds. Some are here for the 8th time. Participants pay only for travel here, explains project leader Andreas Friesiker. Room and board are free. Anyone should be able to join. Forestry authorities cover 40% of the costs. The rest come from donations and sponsors. Andreas Friesiker welcomes everyone to their lodgings on behalf of the project. He says when they go in, they can decide among themselves who will sleep where. The accommodation is on the level of a youth hostel, with several people to a room. Pure luxury, says the team. I notice a hot water bottle. Cecilia laughs and says, just in case. But the rooms seem to be plenty warm here. Next morning, 6 a.m., preparing to plant fir saplings. These outsized tools are called mattocks. They're needed to cut a proper hole in the ground for planting. Each one weighs 4 kilos. In the course of the day, they easily feel much heavier. The day's objective is ambitious. 500 plantings, says Andreas. We should make it, but we'll see. The rest get put into moist soil together, so they don't dry out by tomorrow. The official objective for the week is to plant 2,000 new silver firs. The forester has only 5 employees covering a huge area, so he's glad for the extra help. These tiny firs are already 3 years old. Now care is needed. The roots have to stay undamaged. Most of these saplings won't survive. For every 25 firs that are planted, only 1, on average, makes it. The project leader says it all depends on how much wildlife there is, and on other factors, the amount of snowfall, how dry the summer is, whether other trees will fall on it. There are a whole lot of factors that influence whether a little sapling like this grows to maturity.
Also es sind ganz viele Faktoren, die einen Baum begleiten, so ein kleines Bäumchen, bis er irgendwann groß wird.
I'm surprised at how bad the odds are. Slowly I begin to understand why the crew were taking so much care with the wool earlier on. Back in the woods, Chief Forester Vollmer introduces the crew to the craft of planting trees. The mattock is an unwieldy tool, but Gerlind gets the hang of it. Together she, a teacher, and Ronnie, a truck driver, are a dream team. Dig out the hole, plant the fir, and check for stability. All in neat rows with 1.5 meters of space in between. I ask Gerlind what's the hardest part of planting. She says it's making the hole, because usually there's some kind of surprise involved, a rock or a root. Here it gets tough. As straight as possible, as deep as possible, and losing as little soil as possible. Armin keeps the troops fed. While they toil away, he's responsible for a hot lunch. Not so easy out here in the wild. First he gets only smoke, but then the flames catch. Gerlind and Ronnie have developed a real rhythm. Their firs stand proud. Berlin native Ronnie says nothing beats nature, and if there's anything he can do for it, it's here with the Forest Project. Lunchtime finally comes at 2:30, but the break is a short one. Reaching today's goal of 500 plantings is looking pretty unlikely. But they go for it anyway. The project leader pushes them on. We'll all be planting now in teams of 2, he says. Anyone who can and wants to can work alone. Quality remains top priority. The volunteers are slower than professional forestry workers, but they compensate through their motivation and the sheer fact they're here. 90% of their plants take root. The professionals work in pairs and manage only 65%. Bianca says it's hard work getting the ground ready, but it's also very nice work. Why's that, I ask? She says she was telling Wilfried earlier, it's like building a nest for these baby trees. It's fun. She doesn't know whether their efforts will produce results, But the hope is there. By now, the mattocks feel very heavy indeed. Elisa and Cecilia are having a tough time of it. What's the problem, I ask? Cecilia says it's a giant nugget. Elisa says the rock has to be removed, but it's stuck. It's become a personal struggle for them. I'd have started digging elsewhere long ago. Finally, Elisa says, they've got the right technique. I ask, is it fun or hard? It's both, they agree. But it's not enough for the project leader. Darkness falls in an hour. There's still plenty of plants to go, and they're all so puny. Andreas says each sapling gets a shock from being replanted, and it has to adjust to its new environment. That weakens the plant. It's called planting shock. And it depends how big the shock is. When it goes into the ground weakened, the likelihood it will survive the shock is even lower. The ground here is simply too tough, uneven and full of rocks and roots. No easy job for beginners. By evening, 160 saplings are left unplanted. The kitchen crew is waiting for the volunteers' return. Dinner is all organic, to fortify the workers for tomorrow. They're here another 4 days, as their good deed for the forest.